Hello everyone and welcome to this World Childless Week webinar. We are the NomoCrones and we are gathering around the fire for a special session of Fireside Wisdom with Childless Elderwomen for World Childless Week. And we're kind of interrogating this comment that can be made to people without children is, you're so lucky you don't have kids. And we want to really unpack that and really see, does that hold true when we're old? Is that ever really true? And we're going to kind of look at it from both sides, because parts of it might be true, parts of it might not be true. Aging without children is a challenge, and we're not shying away from those challenges, but we also want to show that there's much more to it than that, and there's much more to it than perhaps the media stories might say, and perhaps even your own inner ageist might be saying to you about what this is about, and also your fears about aging, because I think those are very real for us. And it's something that we kind of really need to talk about so that we can support each other with some of those thoughts and some of those plans. So my name is Jody Day. I'm the founder of Gateway Women and I'm a World Childless Week ambassador. And I am joined by Maria Hill, who is also a World Childless Week ambassador. I am joined by Pamela Mahoney-Sigdinos, who is a World Childless champion this year, having been nominated by childless people all over the world. Yeah, very, very well deserved. Also by Sue Fagaldi-Lick, an author and blogger from Oregon on the West Coast. Susan Dowry, a childless woman and longtime member of online community at shocking o'clock, 5 a.m. in Brisbane, Australia. Tess or Tessa Broad, I'm not sure how, if you prefer Tess or Tessa, you'll tell us no doubt. She's is an author of Dear You, A Letter to My Unborn Children, a really beautiful book that came out in 2017, and she's in the UK. Sue Newsome is an award-winning sex and relationship therapist and a gateway woman, also from the UK. With that, I would love to know, who would like to kick off on this topic? I mean, around someone saying, you're so lucky you don't have children. What do we think about that comment? Just wave at me if you want to kick us off. Sue. By the way, we've got 3 Sues, so I'm going to have to be quite formal.
Yes.
It's Sue Fagaldi-Lick.
Yes. You do hear that, and mostly hear it from parents. And I want to say those nasty words we're not allowed to say here. Well, it's not luck either way, it's what happened. And there are advantages. There definitely are advantages. There's more freedom. There's not going to be an offspring putting me in a nursing home if I don't want to go. There definitely, I have more choices of what to do and things. But at the same time, there is no one to call when something bad happens. I've had situations where I've been sick or injured, or, I had to put my dog to sleep on Wednesday, and God, I wish I had someone with me, because it was very difficult. But, there's all kinds of end of life things that I don't know what to do about it, because there's nobody there to hand things down. So is this lucky? I don't think so. It always feels like a slap in the face.
Yeah, because I kind of get the feeling that, I suppose what they're saying when they say that is that they're talking about their own challenges, and
Right.
and they're comparing their insides to our outsides, which is never a good thing to do, and imagining that our internal and lived reality is easy because it doesn't include the challenges they have. But they don't know what our challenges are because our challenges are completely hidden by society. And if we do try to talk about them, no one listens anyway. So, I can imagine, they are saying, I'm struggling. But the way they're saying it to us, if we were going to give them any support, well, they just nixed that.
Well, they see our lives as free and easy.
Yes,
and
which is, I
they're
mean,
not.
but they're not. I don't know. I don't know who these people are that have these free and easy lives without children. I mean, child-free as well. I mean, there's the idea that child-free people's lives are just sort of white sofas and endless holidays. I don't know any of them either. Maria.
It smacks, first of all, like jealousy to me.
Yep.
And So I do find it offensive in that way, but I also think that it's a way of, it's a kind of one-upsmanship at the same time. On the one hand, women who are independent are seen as a threat. And then, of course, since we're so free and easy, we're obviously not dutiful daughters and mothers and all of that stuff. And so I think it's an interesting comment to make. I've been fortunate, I guess, because I work at home. I haven't had that, but I tend not to discuss childlessness with, my family members or whoever, just because, they're on a totally different planet from me about this stuff. And so, I can't say I've bumped into it a lot, but I have a certain skepticism, just because it's been my experience that women who are independent are often treated, put down. And, if in terms of the social competition, I think that people who are mothers may want to assert some kind of superiority in kind of a backhanded way.
And I think there's also the Pain Olympics is going on as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pamela.
Yeah, if I could just tag on to what Maria said, I think the thing that I find most interesting about people who make rather subjective comments or apply a certain projection because they're looking for something that's missing in their lives onto you, that there is that, I think, unwillingness or maybe just sheer ignorance about understanding what someone else's life might be like and not looking at those of us on this particular discussion as full human beings, individuals whose lives are three-dimensional. They're seeing one dimension. And I think that, in a sense, shows a lot of their narrow thinking. And I think these kinds of conversations are really valuable, not only for us, but as far as helping us to understand how do we better engage in those conversations so that we help make them aware that we're three-dimensional people whose lives don't follow any particularly linear path, just as theirs don't.
That's a really good point, because I think perhaps as elder women, hopefully, and obviously this is not always the case, we perhaps have come more to terms with our childlessness. And so perhaps when someone does say something to us like that, we can perhaps take a reflective response to it in a way that maybe when we were younger, it might have been really triggering, and either we might have been angry or we might have been silenced, but perhaps the opportunity to engage in a bit of kind of allyship at that point might not have been possible. And I mean, I used to have this phrase, for me, Jody, not every moment is a teaching moment. Sometimes I would just I'm just going to park this one, because also sometimes I kind of needed a day off from sort of being an advocate. But I think maybe that's part of our role as elder women and emerging elder women, is perhaps to be curious and kind in those moments and see if we can help them to broaden their perspective. We did a webinar last night, and Sue Fagalde-Lick was part of it, which was fascinating, which was challenging the stereotypes of childless women in film and fiction. And Christina Archetti, who's a World Childless Week champion and also a professor of political communications and journalism, so did this presentation on a study she did on childless people in films from 1957 to about 2000 and something. I mean, I've read about her study before, but she actually did a presentation with a lot of pictures on it. It's really depressing. It is really depressing how across quite a lot of different cultures and over a 50-year period, the way that childless people are portrayed on film is incredibly narrow and very, very harsh and destructive. And if that is what the culture is constantly being fed about us, then it's no surprise at all that parents who don't know people like us from the inside, that's what they think we're like, because that's what the media constantly is pushing out, that if we're single and childless, we're kind of desperate, You know, we're kind of baby stealers, we're psychopaths, we want to hurt people, you know, or we're ball-breaking career women without a sort of, you know, a shred of kindness in our heart, you know, likely to sort of try and boil your bunny. It's, it's, you know, one of what the webinar was about, and Sue read from her work, is how, as childless writers and artists and culture makers, you know, we have to get more nuanced stories out there, because it can't all come from just individual stories of us talking to people. You know, we need the culture to amplify our stories. I mean, I wrote an article for World Childless Week about the unconscious annihilation, symbolic annihilation of childless women in film and fiction. You know, there are technical academic terms for what happens to outgroups and how they're represented in the media, either underrepresented or misrepresented. And childless people are a big outgroup that struggle with this. And I would really, really urge all of you to pop over to the World Childless Week website and watch the webinar from last night. It kind of blew my mind, actually. And I get off my soapbox there. Who else would like to talk about this topic of, you know, you're so lucky you don't have kids? I mean, it hasn't been said to me for a long time. But I have to say, do you know, I actually don't talk about the good stuff in my life very much around parents, because maybe unconsciously I'm defending myself against that, because I think in the early years I lost quite a few friends, and which I didn't really understand, that they were jealous of my life, because their life had become all about, you know, schools and lunchboxes and nannies and cricket matches and everything to do with that. And in that 20 years that was happening to them, I did 2.5 masters, went up the Amazon the wrong way, wrote a book, and started Gateway Women. And I think they could, I had so much to talk about, and and I could see they felt their lives were very narrow. And when we would interact, you know, when I did still get invited to events, and it's, you know, it's been a long time now since I've been invited to those kind of events, I could see that what I wanted to talk about and do was actually quite intimidating to them, because my life had grown in a different direction. You know, both of our lives had grown, but in very different directions. And I'm quite careful now, you know, sort of, I don't want to sound boasting, but I've only just realized that. Yeah. Maybe I'm defending myself against it. Yeah. Tess, can you unmute yourself, love?
Beg your pardon. Not quite, you're so lucky to have children, but as you know, Jody, I'm carer for my elderly mother. She's 91 and I look after her. And I was sort of having a bit of a time, and I was slightly at the end of my rope and having a bit of a bleat about it. And a friend said, the thing is, Tess, you've had such peace in your life. So the implication being that because I hadn't had to deal with the clamour of needy children, that therefore that was why I wasn't coping terribly well at that particular point of looking after my mother.
Oh,
and
wow.
of course, you know, that's not, you know, that was the implication. And I mean, I didn't, like you said, I didn't really sort of rise to it particularly. But I did think actually caring for an elderly person is actually quite different to caring for children, because caring for a child, they will progressively become less dependent and start doing things for themselves. Caring for an older person, they're heading in completely the opposite direction. So my role as carer there is getting more so rather than less so in the role that I'm in. And then, of course, they'll fire back that, you know, my kids are 30 and they're still causing me, you know, blah, blah. But that was sort of a very subtle sort of, life has been easy for you. That's why you're finding it difficult now. So I ain't moaning again. And I mean, to that particular person.
So
So
we can't share our woes and our struggles, and we also can't really talk about things going well. Isn't that
Yes.
interesting? Without getting some kind of pushback, because we don't fit the model, the kind of the patriarchalized woman model. We're independent women, as Maria said, and it looks like, well, you kind of got out scot-free. I mean, of course we didn't. I mean, every human life has its complications. We just don't have the kind of complications they've got going on. But that doesn't mean that our life is not without its complications. And I think particularly now we're, aging without children, and that is a really complicated thing to do. And, quite a few of us on this call and, in wider society are also aging without a partner, or they may have already, they may be widowed. I mean, Sue nursed her husband. Sue Fagaldi-Lick nursed her husband with Alzheimer's. Life comes for us too.
Yeah.
But somehow that doesn't count because we're not mothers. And I find that very, very interesting.
And if I may ask, Tess, did you end up asking them about whether they had considered what your life might be like when you're 90, and the fact that you don't have necessarily those resources to call upon? I think that there is, and again, I know so much of this is a balancing act between not wanting to be confrontational, but rather turn the discussion around to say, my life has had its own share of challenges, but the one thing that you will have that I won't is the opportunity to call upon resources that don't exist for me.
well, no, I didn't. I'm a serial people pleaser. I just sort of, grinned and bore it. But I think I am aware that sometimes that it gets fired back at you that I don't expect my children to look after me. I'm not expecting them. That's not why I had them. Of course not. And I know that I think a lot of the time, I think I've heard Jody mention this before about it's not always the real, what I call sort of the industrial end of caregiving, the bottom wiping, that sort of thing. What I mean is with, I think a lot of parents don't realise when, say, your iPad has frozen, or you've got printer not found has come up again, and something else. These sorts of things that, or you've just got a smart telly and you don't even know how to switch it on. Parents will just call. They'll get their son up, just come around and did that for me.
Yeah.
I don't think they think of that as being cared for. And I think that's the sort of phase I sort of feel I'm in as the sort of age. I'm 62, so that's the kind of the help that I'm feeling I might need at the moment. And of course, I just have to Google it all and hope that 100 other people have got the same problem or something. So I didn't, Pamela, I didn't have a go back, but I'm thinking that, I mean, when I listen to you ladies, and I sometimes think, do you know what? Next time. I'm going to.
I think kind of having, almost rehearsing a few answers. What we had to do perhaps with, do you have kids, or how many kids have you got? And most of us developed a kind of, a selection of answers that, for different situations, and those answers evolved over time as well. I mean, my 93-year-old mother-in-law, I share a home with her, and she doesn't need bathing and feeding care, but I do everything else, getting the car MOT'd, getting her to and from appointments. I do, standing up is for long periods is painful for her now, or even short periods, so I do all the cooking. And in a way, everything to do with the maintenance of life is dealt with for her, and that's caring. That is enabling her to continue to kind of live in a family home. And if she didn't have her son and me, she would be completely dependent on carers. And yet she isn't someone you would think of. Like, you know, what we do is caring, and it's that stuff that, as you say, getting someone from the younger generation to help with how complex modern living can be, and helping to deal with some of the basics, like with her, you know, she couldn't cook for herself anymore. So that is kind of moving into slightly, you know, she's 93. It's moving into kind of, you know, more slightly bigger areas of dependency, perhaps. But you know, I mean, one of the shocking statistics that I found when I was one of the original founders of AWOC in the UK, it's now a charity, so AWOC stands with Aging Without Children, is that people without children are 25% more likely to go into a long-term care facility than people with children at a younger age, at a lower level of dependency. And I think this is for exactly this reason. It is because they have fewer advocates, you know, younger, to step in and help out with all those kinds of things. And that's something I'm really passionate about changing, is actually, you know, the next 10 years of my work, I really want to kind of, you know, show how we can build local networks, what I call alterkin, which stands for alternative kins, you know, alternative kinship networks, in the way that our sort of LGBTQ kind of brothers and sisters have been doing for centuries. You know, we need to create resilient sort of found families. And it's hard, you know, online can only take us so far.
Yeah.
We need people in our neighborhood. And that involves a particular set of skills also. How do you find those relationships? How do you build them? How do you develop them so that when you need them, they are trusted? How do we express that? You know, how do we kind of say this is not a social group? You know, how can we all be actually really transparent about what we're doing here, and things like that? So it's really, you know, it's really interesting. And I've been interviewing people from around the world who've done this, all as kind of research for my project and for my next book, which is a few years down the line, which I hope will be, you know, around this. And yeah, I mean, I think we can be paralyzed with fear, because thinking of what to do can be so hard, because we're planning for a future that is not clear to us, because none of us know who will be in our life at that point, and what our own, you know, physical and emotion, you know, physical needs might be. You know, it's like, but it's interesting, you know, when we were young, we didn't really know what kind of adults we were going to be. But we had permission to dream and work towards it. And I think because of ageism and fear, I'm not sure that we are really investing in thinking and dreaming and planning about what kind of old age do I want, beyond a sort of a fantasy old age where all of your problems are sorted out by someone else. It's like, how do I make my old age as close to what I want as I can manage, whilst also understanding that, you know, very few of us have deep pockets and big resources, you know, I don't know who these people are with money to throw at things, but I don't know any of them. Yeah. What do you think about that, Sue Fagaldivik?
This last week has really shown, and the hardest thing is to ask for help. It's just bloody hard. But I do have neighbors. The couple across the street are also childless, and they have totally stepped in and adopted me. You know, anything I need, I can ask. I don't always ask, but they can. And there's a younger couple next door to them that have totally taken me in too. You know, I keep saying to myself, I'm alone in my house, but I'm not alone in the world. You know, that there are people around. So I do have found family. My own family is what little there is left is too far away. You know, my brother is surrounded by his children and grandchildren. And we had a long talk recently about, okay, what am I going to do? And pretty much he's like, well, it's up to you. And it's like, it's not that he doesn't care. He's just doesn't comprehend a life where you're all by yourself, because he's never had it. So, you know, it's you have to reach out, and it's not easy. It's not easy, but you have to.
I'll be quite honest, something we'll go to Tess, and I think maybe Sue Newsom wants to say something, is I'm definitely looking out for younger people. I mean, I'm certainly feeling that I'm moving into that stage of life, you know, moving out of the generative and into that kind of giving back stage. And I kind of enjoy being around young people and mentoring them. And they get a lot from us. There's someone who's written something in the Q&A, I won't say their name, is saying, you know, in response to Tess saying about not having someone to ask about tech questions, I find it interesting. There may be an opportunity within our network to connect others. I would love to be able to help others due to no parents and no children. And this would fulfill the nurturing need that I have due to being without children. And I think this is something we kind of forget asking for help, is that when we ask for help, we also offer someone an opportunity to be in relationship with us. People often love doing things for other people. And by doing that, we actually create relationship and connections. But if we never ask for help, if we never dare to be that vulnerable, you know, we also miss an opportunity to build real human connection. But I think as childless women, so many of us have become hyper independent. Yeah. And we've lived through an extraordinary 50 years of kind of individualism. Yeah. But I think some of the muscles around what it takes to build community and sustain relationships, maybe the give and take of relationships face to face. I think one of those things in, you know, my project is also going to be about, it's like, how do we reskill ourselves to kind of be in connection? Because it's not always easy, you know. I'm going to jump to Tessa and Sue and then to Pam.
I just wanted to say that it really resonated with me, Sue, about I have written down, I need to learn how to ask for help. I am so fiercely independent, won't ask any help, anything, even I'm glad to have a husband, but I'll try and do something myself rather than ask him to help me. So I know that in my old age, I am going to have to ask for help. And it's not easy when you're used to doing everything and looking after yourself and your own well-being. So I just wanted to say that, you know, that just rang such a bell with me. And I know obviously with a lot of other people it will too.
And I just have to say, I'm rubbish at it. Absolutely rubbish. In fact, quite often people will say to me after I've dealt with an issue, they'll say, why didn't you ask me? I could, and I'm like, it didn't occur to me. You know, it's also, you know, for those therapists here, it's also my attachment style. You know, I have, my core attachment style is avoidant. I worked out very young that my parents were no use at all. So I learned how to do everything for myself. And I kind of take that into all of my relationships. And it's a kind of a quality in myself I've got to kind of really look at and go, are we doing this thing again? I think we are, you know, and kind of catch it, because it could really backfire on me. Sue Newsom and then Pamela.
Yeah, I love to pick up on so much of what's been said this evening. But the point about looking after an elderly parent, because my father is 88, and I wouldn't consider I'm a full-time carer for him, but my role in his care is becoming increasingly significant. It's taking a lot more of my time and my resource. But what I've really noticed around him is that there's his need for the practical care. So, you know, all the sorting out hospital appointments, administration things, making sure he's got food and all of that. But increasingly, I'm really aware of the emotional care that he's needing, and how, in actual fact, that is becoming more and more important for him as he's becoming mentally more frail and confused. And that's really because, obviously, while I'm providing care for him, I'm thinking about my old age and how I'm going to be, and as you said, Jody, what I dream for, what I want to create for myself. And it's not so much the practical stuff, because I think, you know, I've got used to being very resourceful, and if I can make sure I've got the right sort of things arrangements in place, but it's the emotional support. That's what I have a question about. And how am I going to acknowledge my confusion or my loneliness or my scaredness as an old woman, and what am I going to be able to do about that? Because I feel that is going to be so much more important to the quality of my later years than whether I've got, a clean cardigan on, or, whether my floor's hoovered. It's so I'm really holding on to that. And I just wanted to make the point that, as having an elderly parent, that as I'm one of three, I have two siblings, but because I'm the one that doesn't have children, the sort of unspoken expectation of I've got so much more time and I've got so much more resource available to provide for my father. And that's just this unspoken assumption. And I have to really hold my boundaries around that. And because I can very easily just get sucked into, well, of course, that's what's expected of me, so I'm going to deliver. So yeah, those are the key points I wanted to say at this stage.
Thank you. And I'd love to go to Pamela, and then I'd love to pop up to Susan Dowry, because I'd love to talk about other kinds of caring responsibilities other than parents as well. Yeah.
That's right. Susan has been way too quiet. So one of the things I'd like to just comment on is, having been through Tessa and Sue and Jody's experience last year, I spent 6 weeks at my mother's house, the house I grew up in, and realized nothing had been maintained since I left. And it was really shocking to me, because I had to repair the air conditioning, I had to clean the carpets, and I'd been back there, but I had never looked closely at it. And because I was living there alone while my mother was in the hospital, I took a very detailed analysis. The brakes on her car had failed as I was driving them, and I had to get the car to a dealer to try to figure out how to get that resolved. So it was like this all came out of nowhere. And I realized a couple of mental notes, apart from what I was dealing with at the time and the pressure I felt under, was these are very important lessons for me, to always ensure that I have maintained and looked very hard at my own life, because I think we get into a rut and we just don't see things through the eyes of someone who's seeing them for a very fresh perspective. So that's number one, is to constantly put the task back to yourself of, if I'm not able to deal with this 6 months or a year from now, what's my plan B? Because I know that my mother's very capable, but at the time, without a hip, she was not able to do some of that. It's been replaced and she's doing well, but it really was a wake-up call for me. The second thing that became very apparent to me is that importance of looking ahead. And I took myself back to when I was 20. And I was just about to graduate from university, and I was going out into the world for the first time and realizing I had to learn some new skills. I couldn't just fall back on the fact that I had, been pretty well maintained for the first 20 years of my life. And I was very active and I wasn't useless, but I realized I was walking into a new chapter of my life, and I needed to look around and be really circumspect about how I would behave as an independent woman. The third thing I wanted to point out is that if you have not read Lindsay Trott's research, she is a woman in her, I believe she's in her early 40s, who has just written her dissertation on the importance of occupational therapists understanding of the needs of people without children. Wow. And it is a wonderful, very expansive research. So kudos to Lindsay. Lindsay has no children, and she realized as an occupational therapist how few caregivers who are out there today make assumptions about the fact that people have children. So I would really encourage Lindsay Trott's research. I'll get her permission and share it with this group.
There's a lot of love for her in the chat, and people very interested in that too. People who were at the presentation and occupational therapists who are leaning in and looking forward to that information, very much so. Susan, do you feel up to sort of talking about it? Because I think there's a couple of sort of hidden things here. My experience is having a narcissistic mother, and then there are lots of people, of course, who are estranged or their parents are dead, you know, who aren't having this experience. But there's an awful lot of us having different experiences of caring commitments as we age, and I think those get really hidden.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I've got an older brother who was born with disability, and he's the oldest in the family. So his 3 siblings are now, because our parents are dead, his 3 siblings are his carers. I actually get quite a lot of information from him now that I am finding it difficult to get around. I've got lots of musculoskeletal things, and they are getting bad faster than I would like. I often have to get around on 2 forearm crutches these days, or find myself unable to get up the stairs except one leg at a time. I actually crawled up them last night, and I thought, this is the new high and lows.
I'm sorry, that sounds hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. But you've got to laugh, you know. It's like being the only way I'm going to get up these stairs. But then thinking, oh, yeah, okay, well, that's the next stage. I have to be ready for that. I've got to get a doona from upstairs downstairs so that I don't have to do this. And of course, I'm culling. I'm getting out of this house as fast as I can. Jim's has offered, because he's had a lifetime of disability, he has to trust that someone will step up if he gets in a difficult situation. And often they will, as long as the parameters of that care are not too much, too big a responsibility for someone to take on. Then they get scared, they'll step back. But if it's just, you know, can I help you with this, get your shopping from into the car, people will often be quite proactive about offering that sort of support. And if you can pick that moment to say, oh, yes, and laugh about it, your inability to do these transition things, or to tweak it a bit. No, I don't need that, but it would really help if you, whatever it is, took my trolley back, so that what saves me the extra walking. I often ask for that, because I'm quite strong. I just can't walk or stand. Yeah. The other thing, I've actually stopped telling people that that I have a disabled brother, because about I mean, I don't know that it's not that I never say, but I don't offer it up, because it's then easy to pigeonhole me. And what I found difficult, you know, starting about 10 years ago, when I started to wake up basically from depression, was that living within the tram lines of being seen as someone who's completely free and easy, no worries in this world, and someone whose difficulties people just don't want to know about them. I felt, all right, I can for a while there, I thought, well, I can operate within those tram lines and then not bump anybody. But then I started to feel like a 2-dimensional character. I was just like a chair in the room. I wasn't really there. I wasn't there for other people, and I wasn't there for myself. How to overcome that feeling? And the only way I've found to do it is actually say the words out loud. You said it, Sue Newsom. Acknowledge out loud to yourself and to anyone else who happens to be there. I feel really sad right now. Put my hand on my heart and say, I feel really sad, or I feel really lonely, or whatever it is. As a single person too, I think we are, I've had a lifetime of people telling me that I make that I am unstable or I make them feel unstable. I often think about that old-fashioned description people have about their young daughter in their 20s, that she's just married. Yes, she's settled. Well, I am the opposite. I am not settled. And people want to tell me that all the time, that I make them feel unstable, that I'm going to pinch their husband, that I'm going to not be around because I'm not pinned down with care needs. So I'm not a stable potential friend for them, that I'm, and that push back against that idea. Yeah, that's part of it, but
because
it's
that
also...
thing, I just thought that, you know, that thing about being settled, it's as if you unsettle them.
Yeah.
I unsettle them. That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I could say, well, you know, the statistics say that it's more likely that in 20 years' time you will be widowed and separated or divorced than it is likely that me, as a 60-year-old, will be married. But I've never actually been brave enough to try that one.
Oh, I think that's definitely worth an experiment.
It's worth an experiment, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that care-wise, for me, it's rediscovering, because sort of depression, flatness was such a part of my life for 15 years before I realized what it was and started to work my way out. That loss of seeking circuit stuff, I've made a list, all of that wanting, pursuing, feeling excitement, taking action, feeling satisfaction, feeling pride, that the loss of that stuff, looking for that in myself and in others, is what I'm I look for now. What makes a meaningful connection, and forgetting the idea that an expectation that a real connection, noticing that in myself or others, is going
There's
to
something
be
gorgeous
long.
actually on one of our other calls, that not all connections have to kind of lead to big friendships, that actually
They don't
we can
go
actually
for
have very sustaining small connections in moments
Yes.
that can be really profoundly nourishing in our lives. And
Yes.
I agree. I love those, and I seek those. And I think when you get to know people in your local area, if not necessarily a local community, even a connection with the same person making your coffee, or the same person in the shop, or the same person in a bus, there can be this, it's a certain type of relationship, but it's also nourishing. It's like, I see you, I remember you, how are you, what's going on? And it's not going to lead to, a deep friendship or, a lifelong connection, but it's like, if we sort of manage our expectations and enjoy it for what it is. I was really struck by that when you said that, on our last call, and it made me notice how important those are to me.
Yes, they're very important, and they just modify that feeling of, for me, of alarmed aloneness, sustained panic grief.
And alarmed aloneness is a really interesting thing, because I think that is one of the underlying fears of aging without children. I mean, the amount of women over the years who have told me that they think they're going to end up as a bag lady. Now, this is a metaphor which doesn't travel to every culture. And what it actually means is an old lady on her own with her possessions in a shopping trolley, going down the street and living on the streets and having no one, And it is amazing how many of us actually fear that, regardless actually of our financial situation. It seems to be a deep down archetypal fear of women aging without children. And it's like, if we can kind of unpack that and show compassion towards that part of us, and it also acknowledge that it's a reality, it is something that could happen. And probably relationships are probably a bigger insurance policy. And I don't mean romantic relationships. I mean all kinds of relationships. they are probably the richness of old age, is those kinds of relationships, you know. Yeah. Now, time is ticking past. Somebody has asked a question. They'd be interested to know specifically what each of your responses are to someone saying to you, "You're so lucky not to have kids." What have you each learnt is the best response for you? Well, I have to say, I don't think anyone's actually said that to me in those words, but I mean, someone in the chat was saying she's had kind of like, must be nice, you know, that kind of thing coming at her. I have to say, if someone comes at me with that, I mean, I am a bit naughty sometimes. Sometimes I might just say, yeah. You know, just to kind of see what would happen, just to kind of have an experiment, you know, just to, and also something we were talking about earlier is people saying, you know, I didn't expect my children to take care of me when we were old. And actually, when I was with Aging Without Children and we were running events and there would be parents at them and they'd say that. And I'd say, absolutely, I get it. You know, when I was trying to conceive, the thought never entered my mind, I'm having children so they can take care of me. I said, the moment I knew I wasn't having children, it was like the next thought. It just like came out of nowhere and landed on me and terrified me. But so I said, yeah, I get that, you know, you didn't, that's not what you want to happen. I'm really interested what plans you're taking, what plans you put into place so that that isn't the case.
Yeah.
Cue crickets. They definitely wanted to find someone easier to talk to at the party at that point, because unconsciously, that I had pointed out to them that unconsciously they were relying on it. They didn't have to make any plans because unconsciously, and this may actually be a very bad strategy for them.
Yeah.
Unconsciously, they were relying on their children, making those decisions and providing that care if and when they needed it, which might not be the right care or what they want or anything. Now, we don't have that unconscious security blanket. We have to face the reality that there are going to be difficult decisions and wonderful decisions ahead. But I think the fear of aging without children is immobilizing so many of us from thinking creatively, like Pamela said, from thinking, okay, I'm in a new life stage, I need new skills for this life stage, and actually seeking them. I mean, so many of us seem to be sort of sleepwalking into perhaps our worst case scenario because we're too scared to think about it and talk about it with each other and find creative solutions. But we're smart, you know? We're a smart, resourceful, resourced group of women. We can do this. Maria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that strikes me, and I don't hear people talking about it very much. I mean, when I look into the future, I'm not really worried about finding carers. I see capitalism unwinding. And I think that what we can rely on is really a big question mark. And certainly in the United States, where we are just abysmal when it comes around to community, it's a huge problem. I think, you know, European countries and others you have a much better chance of going about dealing with your aging by finding people, you know, that can support you. And here in the United States, maybe not, because we just don't have that kind of community. And it is a very mobile society. And so unless people are actually paid, I mean, I live in it's a very nice, you know, community here, but everyone's off doing their thing, you know, and people very rarely connect at any sort of level. Now, I can go to a few neighbors and knock on their door if I actually absolutely needed something. But, you know, that's about the extent of it. And because capitalism is unwinding all over the globe, I mean, to me, one of the first things I have to do is take stock and say, how can I simplify my life to minimize what I need? And when you do that and you take those steps, then you actually can open up your life to start thinking about what you would like your aging to be like, because you've created space for it. But at least here in the United States, I think it's absolutely imperative that you try to simplify your life as much as possible and get as many of your needs under your control. So you're not just so exposed, because in the United States, you're exposed.
I agree. And I would like to say that I believe that perhaps Americans have a rose-tinted view of what's going on in Europe. Our
Could be.
social welfare
Yeah.
system has been completely dismantled over the last 30 years. Our elder care system and our social healthcare systems have been completely underfunded. They are on their knees or completely flat on their face.
Well, I don't know the cultures over there, but at least you've had it.
Even finding paid carers is almost impossible. So, you know, it's when I talk about, you know, finding community, I'm not saying those communities exist. I'm talking about actively creating found family, doing something very different, because I totally agree with you about capitalism unwinding. Nothing that I'm suggesting involves things that exist. I'm talking about people. I'm talking about childless people finding a way to look out for and support each other across the lifespan. I mean, my fantasy is that perhaps in 20 years' time, when I'm 80, I will have a local group of women who I've known for many years, some of who are older than me and some of whom are younger than me, and I will have a pool of people who care about me, who can maybe come together in times of crisis. Now, you know, it may be a fantasy, but most of the things I've created in my life have started like that. I'm going to give it a go. And you know why? Because I don't see an alternative. You know, if I don't create a way to have people around me who care about me, who aren't my family, there is no alternative. You know, there is no state alternative or no paid alternative. So, and I have no siblings, and you know, so it's like, I think it's a difficult question, and it's a scary one. I genuinely believe that in many areas of life, we're going to have to find unthinkably new solutions to things as all of the old systems break down. And we need to find new ways to be there for each other and to support the vulnerable around us. And we may be those vulnerable, but there also may be people that we can support too. So we're in the last few minutes. It'd be lovely to hear from each of us, just maybe checking out. I'm going to put something in the chat for you all, because I did prepare a list. So just so you know, I'm going to send you, I've prepared a list of about 8 books that are really useful to help you think about aging from the angle of sort of slightly metaphysical, philosophical ones, and some really brilliant ones like this one. Who will take care of me when I'm old? Really super, super practical, granular books. And all of them, actually, none of them presume that the person reading it has property, financial resources, or a partner. You know, they're like, you might have those things, but it is not presumed. And I find a lot of books I read about aging, I end up throwing them at the wall. They presume that everyone's got children, grandchildren, a partner, a property and money, and in America, a 401 savings account, and in Europe, a big pension fund. And it's just like, I'm sorry, who are these fucking people? Right, okay. I'm gonna put myself on mute while I do that.
We can't hear you.
All I said is, will someone else just talk while I'm sorting out this list?
About the question, when people say that you're so lucky, I think for me, the best way to turn around is say, yes, in some ways, but I think you're really lucky to have your children. You know, that would be my response.
And I feel very strongly that it depends on the circumstance as to how to respond. If you know the person well, you might be in a situation where you can say, it may appear that way on the surface, but in truth, there's a lot about my life you don't really understand either. For others that I don't know very well, I'll just tell them gently, you know, that's a really bold assumption, and I would encourage you not to make that same statement to people you don't know very well. And if you want to learn more about my life, I'm happy to go into some detail, but just know that's kind of insensitive.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess for me, when in my younger years, I always got such a strong visceral response to those sorts of comments, and which often then just closed me down. I would just withdraw because I really felt so hurt, and I just could not formulate any sort of meaningful response. But I think with maturity, I'm more interested now in trying to engage and so if comments like that, I hear them, you know, I'm more, well, you know, if you're thinking I'm lucky, how do you imagine it is? You know, you from that place of being, you know, envious or jealous, what do you imagine it's like, you know, from my point of view? And I then hopefully that opens up the possibility of some dialogue and trying to create a moment of connection if possible.
Yeah. Yeah. To create some curiosity and some connection. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. I just wanted to signal up that my sister, World Childless Week Ambassador Maria Hill, has a wonderful webinar coming up on Sunday. Maria, do you just want to tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, it's going to be tomorrow I guess it'll be 2 o'clock my time, so it'll be an hour earlier in the afternoon. It's the Age of the Queen, and I'm talking about how times are changing, and that due to changing times and our grieving process, our wisdom being out in the world, we have the opportunity to reconsider what it means to have queen energy, not the power behind the throne or the more decorative queen model that we see in modern times, but what would be a more richer, more embodied, whole queen with all of her gifts and powers available to her, and being able to live from that place. So we're going to be talking about what that might be like.
Yeah, I can't attend live, but I'm really looking forward to the catch up. And interestingly, when I was a kid, I never wanted to be a princess. I always wanted to be the queen. I always thought, I'm just going to bypass this whole princess thing. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for everything in the chat. I'm going to read the chat afterwards. There has been so much going on. Thank you for taking very good care of each other. This will be up on the World Childless Week website tomorrow for anyone who wants to watch it again. Do stay in touch. This is such an important conversation. There's been some beautiful comments in the chat about people, younger people, really getting what we're talking about creating these intergenerational connections. Because just as elders need youngers, youngers need elders. Yeah. You know, we can have these intergenerational connections that can be so nourishing for all of us. And you know, I may be optimistic, but I do think it's part of the answer for aging without children. So thank you so much for being with us for this World Childless Week webinar and everything. There's more stuff on the website to come. So do go to worldchildlessweek.net, and also congratulate Stephanie. She won a big award from the BBC last night for a woman making a difference, and she really, really deserved it. So thank you so much, everyone. As they say, I've been Jody Day, and we've been the NomoCrones. So thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.